We'll be reading from 1 Peter chapter 5, 1 through 4. 1 Peter chapter 5, 1 through 4. So I exhort to the elders among you, as a fellow elder and a witness of the suffering of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those who are in charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. You may be seated.
As many of you already know, throughout the course of the year, we're recognizing various people who made significant contributions to the 50-year history of our church family. Some of those people have been charter members. We're recognizing them because they were here when the congregation started. Some have been ministers and elders, deacons, Bible class teachers, song leaders, secretaries, and custodians. We've tried really hard to explain that yes, we're honoring each of these individuals for their contributions to the health and the strength of the congregation, but we also intend for them to serve as representatives of everyone, of all of us who have made sacrifices, have served to make North MacArthur such a great church home. Tonight, as part of that ongoing celebration, we're recognizing Charles Williams. And I think it's so appropriate that several times, as we've mentioned, that we're recognizing Charles, we're really recognizing Charles and Joyce, and really all of their family, and we're glad that so many of you are here tonight. Charles did not say this, but he might borrow this if he wants to. There was a man in Mount Vernon that had 3 daughters, and he said, "Tim, 3 queens beats three jacks any day." And part of serving as an elder and part of being just the outstanding leader that Charles and Joyce have been in their lifetime, you see how their faith affects the people that are closest to them. Their daughters, the men that their daughters have married, the families, the grandchildren that those families have raised, and we're grateful for all of that. There's so many things that I'd like to say about him. I don't think he would like that. Maybe we can share some of those wonderful stories in a more private setting, but because we're thinking about his service as a minister and an elder, I thought it would be interesting and helpful for us to look at some of the language that the Bible uses to talk about and to describe the different offices or the office of church leadership. There are some people that look at these 3 words and they've concluded they describe 3 different positions or offices. I think the more biblical understanding is that we have 3 words that are used interchangeably to describe one work or one office. We're going to look at 2 passages tonight. Jimmy read one of them for us already. But you'll see in Acts chapter 20, as Paul is saying goodbye to the leaders in the church at Ephesus, he uses all 3 of these terms to refer to the same group of men. Peter does something similar in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. And so I want to read those passages and just highlight the words as we go along. In Acts 20 and verse 17, from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church. The word there for elders, presbyteros. And that's one of the words that God uses in the New Testament to describe church leaders. In verse 28 of that same chapter, therefore take heed to yourselves, all the flock among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, the word episkopos, overseer, bishop, to shepherd, poimen is the Greek word, the church of God which he has purchased with his own blood. So the words are elders, overseers or bishops, in the word shepherd. And it's interesting, you see all three of those words used again describing the same leaders in 1 Peter 5, 1 and 2. The elders who are among you, I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the suffering of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. And so tonight, as we celebrate 50 years of God's blessings here at North MacArthur, I think one of the great blessings has been the families, the husbands and wives that have been such a blessing to this congregation because of their role in church leadership. The first word, the word elder. It would appear no single role in the Lord's church is more important than that of an elder. And just the reasoning for this, when you think about Paul and Barnabas and their great missionary journeys, in Acts chapter 14 and verse 23, we're told they went back and visited all of those recently established churches to appoint elders in every congregation. They didn't go back and visit each of those congregations to install ministers or to appoint deacons. The practice of ordaining elders in every congregation seemed to be of the utmost importance to them, and it continues to be important in Paul's life and ministry. We see that practice was an ongoing practice for him. He commands Titus in Titus 1 and verse 5 to ordain elders in every city. And then he goes on in verses 6 through 9 of Titus 1 to provide a list of qualities or qualifications these men should possess. He includes a similar list in the first of his two letters to Timothy in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7. Based on Paul's teaching and practice, we conclude that the elders are important. We continue to look at other passages to try to understand a little bit more about who they are and what they do. That term, elder, is associated with the leadership in the Jerusalem church, making it the earliest word used for the office in the New Testament. Not just the earliest word, but it's the one most frequently used. It appears 10 times in the book of Acts, and it continues to appear throughout the New Testament. Passages like 1 Peter 5, which we've also mentioned in James 5:14. The word presbyteros is defined as someone who is older, elderly, advanced in life. Of course, that raises questions. How old does a man have to be to serve as an elder? Some might reverse that and ask, how young is too young to be an elder? I think in the modern church, men have been appointed in their mid-30s. Some congregations won't appoint a man until he reaches his mid-40s, early 50s. What age does the word elder indicate in the original context? In the New Testament, as in other ancient Greek writings, the term elder is often used in contrast with the term younger. I think about Titus 2, verses 1 through 6. The older men are called to teach the younger men. The older women are asked to teach the younger women. It's possible the New Testament divides adulthood into two seasons. The youth, those who are young, and those who are older. Some of you men near 40 would be happy to know 20 to 40 is a young man. Are you delighted that you learned that tonight? And so somebody older would be anybody over 40. It's possible to conclude that an elder in the New Testament in that culture could be identified purely by age. A man no younger than his mid-40s. And yet, age is not the only, and maybe not even the primary factor. We've seen the term elder has association with age. But the word is not used about age alone. Again, we have these qualifications in Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3, and while the word clearly speaks of one who is more mature, it also includes a person of great character. And so age may not be the primary requirement as much, maybe equally important to wisdom is the evidence of wisdom in a person's life. Job 12 and verse 12. I think this passage is probably reflective of how most of us think. He said, with aged men is wisdom, and in length of days understanding. We think wisdom comes with age. We want elders to be older because we think if they're older, that means they're wiser. But Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 13 says, better is a poor and a wise child than an old and foolish king who will no more be admonished. I think these statements are enough to prove that an elder in the church is more than just an older man. An elder is one who has proved himself to be wise. In some sense, it has less to do with age than it does to do with character and wisdom that so often come with age. That word elder may be the most recognized word as we think about the role that these men fill. The second word is the word bishop. It comes from episkopos. It's a term that obviously is used in relationship to church leadership. Literally means a supervisor or an overseer. And that word overseer is going to be seen in translations like the New American Standard Bible, the NIV, ESV, and others. It's possible to think of a supervisor as someone in a position of, they're cold and authoritarian. I think that would be a great mistake to view elders from that perspective. This word in the New Testament actually conveys the warmth of looking after people and things. It's not a person that's cold and distant, too busy taking care of their supervisory responsibilities to be interested in the needs of people under their care. I thought this was really interesting. James chapter 1 and verse 27 that talks about pure and undefiled religion uses the idea of you're going to visit widows and orphans. The word that we're looking at for a church leader here, episkopos, a form of that word is used to translate our English word visit. It's, I'm going to stumble trying to say it, episkeptomai. Here's what I thought was interesting about that. See, most of us, when we think about visiting widows and orphans in their affliction, we think about going to see these people. You're going to visit them. You're going to go and see the elderly, the sick, the shut-in, the widows, the widowers, the orphans. That's the modern definition to visit. The biblical meaning is to look after the needs of. You know, you can go and see some people and not really look to their needs. This is an excellent definition of what it means to be a bishop. In the church, these men are appointed to look after the needs of the congregation. There are some examples of this even in the Old Testament or in the Greek version of the Old Testament. This term referred to officials appointed to look after others in the Israelite military. You'll see that in Numbers 31 and verse 14. But especially to look after the temple and passages like 2 Kings 11, 18, Nehemiah 11 and 22. And these temple officials, they're not priests, but they're servants appointed by the priests to guard and to supervise and to care for the house of God. Unlike the word elder, which does not apply to an office per se, the term bishop suggests an officially appointed position of recognized responsibility. We'd recognize Psalm 109 and verse 8 even from our recent study of the book of Acts as the apostles meet to replace Judas. Again, in the Greek translation of that text, let his days be few, let another take his office. Somebody else is going to take over his supervisory role. That should be enough to prove that an elder in the church is more than just an older man. An elder is one who's proven himself to be wise, reliable, trustworthy enough to serve in a supervisory capacity, looking to the needs and meeting the needs of the people under his care. There's a sense, again, of warmth and intimacy, and we see that again in the third and final word, for church leadership, which really is translated to our word shepherd. You have elders, you have overseers or bishops, and then this word that really has the idea of tending to a flock, fulfilling the same kind of responsibility that a shepherd would have to his sheep. If bishop is an official term, shepherd it's more of a relational concept. One author said we're living in a relational age, and it's therefore no surprise that many modern churches refer to their leaders as shepherds rather than as elders or bishops. I tend to think the most common word among us is the word elder. Maybe we use the word overseer, but probably the word that has the most sentimental meaning to us is the idea that these men shepherd our souls. I can't tell you how many times people have visited about the congregation here when I'm someplace else talking about what I love so much about North MacArthur. And one of the things that I always talk about is how our elders care for the souls of people. And that from the earliest day of my partnership with the congregation, they never treated me any different than the rest of the congregation. They have shepherded my family and my soul and looked after our needs. And there's a real blessing in looking at these men and what they do through the lens of that word. It's possible as we look at them as shepherds that it breaks down the barriers between the congregation and its leadership. It invites a sense of warmth and family relationship, and all of that is a good thing. I thought it was interesting that first century churches did not typically refer to their leaders as shepherds. Ephesians 4:11 may be the only possible exception to that. But the idea of shepherding is almost always used as a verb in reference to church leadership. In other words, terms like elder and bishop describe who the men are and the role they occupy. Shepherd describes, that's what they do. That's the work that they perform. If you listen again to some of the passages we read in the introduction, Paul commands the Ephesian elders, therefore take heed to yourselves, to all the flock among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to shepherd the church of God which he purchased with his own blood. And so he referred to the elders in that passage as overseers, but he commanded them to shepherd the flock, making a distinction between who they were and what they did. And Peter likewise, I think, advises the elders of the church to shepherd the flock of which God, the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers. Elder and overseer appear as nouns. Shepherd is a verb. I was reading several articles this past week, and most recent issue of the Spiritual Sword was on this topic. One of the writers said you can't really be appointed to shepherd any more than you could be appointed a fisherman. If you're going to be a fisherman, you got to fish. And if you're going to be a shepherd, you have to do the shepherding. You can't just wear the title or be appointed to an office. You have to do the work. Here's what so many of us think about, what the term represents to us and what we see so beautifully portrayed in the lives of our elders here at North MacArthur. The term implies continual activity. They're always busy. And they're busy doing some very important things. They're always trying to know the sheep and to feed the sheep, to protect them when there are threats, to console them when they are afraid, to restore them when they wander, to tend to them when they're hurting or wounded. And I would say that that word probably more than any other represents what I've seen in my nearly 19 years of partnership with these men. They have consistently been a part of feeding the congregation by writing, adult Bible class curriculum and writing, children's Bible class curriculum, overseeing those programs and consistently being in front of congregation, different classes in the congregation to teach. But that's not the only way that they feed this congregation. I think the idea that an elder should be apt to teach should never be limited to the idea that they stand up on a Sunday in front of a group. I think one of the most wonderful ways that they perform this responsibility is that whenever there's crisis in our lives, whenever we're facing hardship or we're confused and we don't know what to do, whenever we're hurting or we're afraid, these are the men that come into our lives with their biblical wisdom, and they show us the way to walk in a way that is pleasing to God. They bring the truth of God's Word, their wisdom and their experience, their compassion and their love. And not only do they teach us with an open Bible in hand, but they teach us by the quality of their lives. They are everything we believe them to be. Not perfect, but above reproach, genuine, godly, good people. When we wander away, they're the ones who come looking for us. When we're struggling, they're the ones who listen. When we're broken, they so often know what to do and what to say to help us mend, to heal. They're easy to find. They're leaders in the sense that they are out in front. And we trust their voice because they've been faithful. And because we know them. They've been in our homes. We've been in their homes. We've shared meals together. They've walked with us through some of the most difficult, trying times of our lives. And we honor that tonight. We honor that in the life that Charles and Joyce Williams have lived in full display before all of us. But again, they're just representative of all those people. If I can wrap it up, I think one of my favorite memories is the time we came in and we had a potluck on Sunday night, and Gus told me to hurry up. Y'all remember that? I got up here and I was showing off. I'm up here, and he turned my mic off. That was one of my favorite memories. And then I looked back and his face was so red, and that made it better. The word elder helps us to identify men with age, wisdom, and experience. The word bishop or overseer helps us recognize an official position with authority to look after and care for the needs of the church. The word shepherd has been used almost exclusively to describe the work church leaders do, not the title they have, not the office that some aspire to, but the work that they do. And the imagery of this word helps us to understand their responsibility to feed, to nourish, to protect, to lead us closer to God. And tonight we honor these men, and we thank God. We thank God for their service. There's so much more that I'd like to say about the personal nature of their friendship, their leadership, and their example, but obviously the chief shepherd is Jesus. And what makes the best shepherd is those who are walking most consistently in his footsteps. And Jesus is the shepherd over our souls. And he's the one that when we end every service with an invitation, it's not an invitation to the church, it's an invitation to Jesus. To come to that gentle and loving shepherd who laid down his life for the sheep. And you may need tonight, there may be some need in your life that what you need more than anything else is to get to Jesus. And don't you know that's exactly where he wants you to be? So won't you come to him as we stand and sing?